Ana Lorena Fabrega, my partner in Rite of Passage summer camp. So we got connected through my Rite of Passage course, and then I started talking to you, and I realized that you and I had the exact same vision for the future of education. We both felt like there were things that were seriously wrong with the school system. We both felt like people, and kids in particular, weren't able to explore their passions, the things that they were actually curious about. And with that, we began to have a lot of conversations, and we found that our perspective on what education should look like was the same, and we decided to create a camp for kids. So why don't you introduce yourself really fast, and then we'll spend some time talking about what we're doing together and the vision that you have. You're leading the charge here, the vision that you have for the future of childhood education.
Yeah, so hi, it's great to be here. I taught elementary school for 5 years, particularly third and fourth grade, and I really enjoyed working with kids and all the fun part of learning. But I grew discontent with the system and my inability to really transcend it and do the things that I felt were really meaningful and valuable for the kids and for the teachers as well. Like many educators, I realized that a lot of what happens in school is very different from what happens in the real world. So the learning in school is really doesn't reflect what we really do in the real world. And the kids know this. And this is creating a disconnect between their ability to learn and what they enjoy and what's happening in school. So I spent a lot of time talking to my kids and really trying to see what was causing that disengagement. And it turns out that kids have become cynical about school. They feel like it counts because they have to go to the next grade and they need to do this and that, and they learn how to play the game of school, but they don't really feel like it matters. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you talk to kids, especially kids nowadays, and I recently wrote about this, their interests are so broad, and they like things like magic, and they like things like woodcrafting and dancing and bird watching and creative writing and bookbinding and all these things that they don't really get addressed in school. In school, they have to follow a curriculum and learn specific subjects and things that have been already decided for them, and this they don't really see the connection again with what this has to do with their real life. So I just couldn't help but notice that disengagement and how it just became worse as kids grow and they go from one grade to the other. And really the whole purpose of education, when you think about it, is to really help kids become interested in learning on their own. And this is just not happening in school. And I saw it over and over again. So it got to the point where finally last year I decided to leave, and then in search of another creative learning experience where kids really had the chance to explore their passions and the things that they're interested in and come up with problems that they want to solve and solutions and do things that relate more with what they're going to be doing in real life. And when I left, I took your course, like you said, Rite of Passage. And that was really the first time that I experienced online learning, but like in a very lively way, and what it is to learn in a community and receive that support and connect with like-minded people. And it empowered me in ways that I hadn't felt with any school or college. And just a little background about me, I moved a lot as a kid. And I went to, I lived in 7 different countries. I went to 10 different schools, from traditional to conventional, more progressive, religious schools, non-denominational. So I've been around the block when it comes to school. And I went to 2 different colleges, and it was just more of the same thing. And I just never felt empowered. And for some reason, when I was in this Rite of Passage course, I did feel empowered, and I felt like, okay, I'm ready to start sharing and start talking about the things that I really care about. And the community of people pushed me to explore the things that I was interested in. And I couldn't help but think, oh my gosh, what if we bring something like this to kids and really offer them that opportunity to start by the things that they're curious about and then take it from there. So we started talking, we started sharing our views. And yeah, like you said, we realized we have a lot in common in terms of the way we think about education. And then this idea sparked of, why don't we create a summer camp to start with, where kids really get to just join and connect with kids from different parts of the world. There is no curriculum. There's not a teacher telling you what to do, but rather, we're kind of like incentivizing them to explore the things that they like, talk about their ideas, which sometimes, in school they don't really have the chance to really talk about those, and then see what they would come up with. And so that's what we did, and we just did the pilot last week, and it turns out that kids can create amazing things when you give them that freedom to just dig into the things that they're curious about. And automatically you see them working hard without you having to ask them to do it. And that's just something beautiful to watch, and it's very rewarding. And they left, this week and this experience feeling like, wow, there are so many things that I can do on my own if I have the space and the right support and the community of people pushing me to really explore those things that matter to me. So that was pretty rewarding, what we did last week.
Cool. So we will sort of go through all that. It's funny, like we hang out so much and just talk so much, but I never actually put the connection together of how many schools you were actually educated in. Like you set some sort of Guinness Book of World Record of just like hopping between Brazil and moving through America and then being a Panamanian citizen. Like you are like Carmen Sandiego, but in a teacher edition. And one of the things that we always talk about, because when you and I hang out, we're just like kids. Like there's no one in the entire world that I'm more immature with than you. Like I'm a total goon. And what you and I do, when we're talking, when we're ideating, we jump between being, okay, David, Nana, we need to be mature adults right now, and we need to have things orderly and well-structured, and that is not where we're good. But then where we're really good is once we can just be kids. And you and I have this thing where we go and we'll basically get into the mindset of a 10-year-old as we talk. And I think that actually leads into this sentence that you said that I think is so powerful. It's like a nuclear bomb with density and meaning, that kids can't be kids anymore. They don't have space to follow their curiosities. They don't have space to explore their intellectual passions. They don't have space to learn on their own. And there's this overbearing, dark, stormy weight of college that has now infected the childhood experience. And what we're trying to say is not only can learning be fun, but letting kids be kids, it can actually be more effective.
Absolutely. I recently came across a quote that said that childhood needs better PR, like public relations, and it's so true. It's so true. If you really sit down and start talking to kids, and you start to hear the things that they come up with, and it's just incredible. It's incredible, their ideas. The problem is that they don't have the time or the space to actually explore those ideas and take them further and see where that leads them, because they're stuck for so many years in this conventional places where they have to go through the motions, and they have no space to really explore that creative side that really leads to amazing things. And when I was thinking, well, what can we do for this first creative experience that we want to do with the kids? I started really thinking about three things. The things that we know about how kids don't learn, the things that we know about how kids do learn, which are very simple. We don't have to go into scientific terms or anything. And then what really is the role of an educator in this whole experience as a facilitator? We know that kids won't learn, and this is for adults too, unless they really care about what it is that they're learning. We know that they also don't learn when you cram them information that they really have to quickly do in order to pass a test, right? We know that they won't learn if they have to learn in order to do something that's not meaningful to them. And if they don't see that direct relation to their lives and to where this is taking them. And when the content just seems irrelevant. We do know that kids learn in many different ways, right? But we know that they learn by doing. We know that they learn when they really have the desire to learn because they understand that there's a purpose behind the learning. They learn by being active. They learn by teaching other kids, which is also a big part of Rite of Passage Summer Camp. They learn when they are playing, when they go through trial and error, and they get to test their ideas. So these are all things. And the big thing here is like curiosity is really what gets them to want to start learning. And these are all things that kids usually don't have space and time to do in school. So we really wanted to focus on those things that we know that work, but also not give a lot of structure. And the role of of the educator in this case, what I do is, instead of like teaching them and telling them what to do, is just really create the condition for them to want to learn and not have to learn. And this is something that's pretty challenging for them to come to terms with, because they're so used to a teacher telling them what to do, that when they show up, they're kind of like, whoa, what do you mean that we're going to learn about what you want to learn? Like, where do we start? Well, where do you want to start? What are you curious about? At first, they're a bit like skeptical, because we've conditioned them to think, well, no, I tell you what to do. So it's really interesting to see how from day to day they go from being a little bit skeptical, and then towards the last days of summer camp, they're like, I barely talk. They're all over the place. They're sharing their things, and they're really just taking charge of their ideas and their learning. So really, our job is just tapping into their curiosities and challenging them creatively, and just forging those connections between what they want to learn about and what they should be learning about. So it's like that mix that we've been really like touching upon, and it was the first time we did it, and we have some things that we're going to be improving for the second time, but it went really well.
Yeah, one of the things, there's a very interesting paradox embedded within your philosophy of education, and it's that you want to treat kids like adults in some way. They can actually decide what they want to learn on their own. They can think through how to structure a project without a syllabus. And these are these radical ways in which you're saying, you know what? We need to start treating kids like adults. And very often we just treat them almost like animals. Like, oh, it's just a dog. It's just a kid. Like, the emotions don't mean much. And what you're saying is, no, let's raise them up there. But what you're also saying is, we don't need to put kids through this mill, through this factory of trying to get into college, trying to get into some Ivy League school, trying to get a good score on the SAT. And what school has become, the reason why my school experience was just awful, was because it was all trying to set me up for college and SAT, as if I did well, then I would be successful. Now, if that was the case, like if I just automatically went to the top 10 schools and everything else was made for me, then maybe there would be some merit to that argument, but it's not even true at all. Like, I know so many people who went to the Stanfords, went to the Harvards, went to the Princetons, and they said, yeah, I got to meet great people, but the actual education wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And so what we're saying is, well, given that, knowing that if you get into an Ivy League school, life still isn't just going to be an easy walk down the park. Let's let kids be kids. Let's bring back childhood, a time for play, a time for imagination, a time for friendship, a time for smiles. And within your framework is more adult and more kids. And I absolutely love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the fact that, school has become very serious, and you once told me once in an email that we were exchanging when I first met you that, adults seek playfulness as well. Like, it's something so crucial and so important that, because of all the rigid structure that school has created, kids kind of lose that. And really, when they're in that playful state, and this is what I've come to realize through this summer camp and through different things I did in the class that had nothing to do with the curriculum, where kids were relaxed and were having fun and were just, talking to each other, that's when the magic happened. That's when their ideas start to spark. And that's when you would see the highest levels of engagement. And it just blows my mind how something so simple has been forgotten by so many educators and schools that have the best intentions, but are so focused on that test, on all those standards and the metrics and having to teach for this and this and that they forget what really makes kids learn and what really turns that, lights up that creative side of them. So really the idea of this online space that we're creating is to make it as relaxed and joyful and playful as possible, and to kind of like simulate like the real world. So if you look at what we did for this first time around, and I'm sure we're going to keep updating it, and we're going to keep pulling from different pedagogies and things that resonate with us, but we kind of got inspired by the design thinking process and this idea of learning through making. And it's kind of like a version of it, right? Because kids are not using like laser cuts and 3D printers and any of that. Like, no, like really what they're doing is just using, making as a creative expression to bring their ideas to life, right? And they have so much fun when they do this. They have so much fun and they don't even realize that they're learning until we stop and we have them reflect on their process and talk to each other, that they say, whoa, like I've been having so much fun building all these things and I've actually been learning and I want to learn more about the thing that I'm exploring. And we also talked about how there are different kinds of making, and there's making for just having fun, which is also good, right? Kids have fun doing it. But also when you make with a purpose behind it, it just makes it so much more powerful. So that's what we have them start by finding and identifying a problem that they care about. And then really like doing some research around that. And then we mix it with the second day, they start to explore their passion. And it's really interesting because some kids had never even thought about the things that they're curious about, that they like about, that they enjoy doing. We have to really prompt them and get them to reflect, for them to say, oh, I love playing the drums. I love creating rap songs. I love, like, they don't spend time thinking about this. So we really do that second day. And the kids start exploring things that they actually enjoy doing that they never have time to do. And then the third day, they start to come up with ideas to join their skills and their passions and the things that they enjoy doing, and what they could do with that to solve that problem, or to start to think about ways to solve that problem, right? Because some kids just pick big problems. And then the fourth day, they start making and creating. And it was just really fun. We had music, we had kids like throwing different jokes in the chat, and it was just a very lively environment. And then finally, the last day, they get to share what they created. And we talk about how they're not only sharing with the campers that are in the group, but I try to incentivize them to think, okay, now what could you do after this? Who else could you show this to? What's the next step? Okay, so you already created this, or you have this great idea. How can we show it to the world? And the moment you say that, you see their eyes kind of like sparkle. They're like, what? Like, my ideas and what I created can go beyond only the people in my class or mom and dad or my teacher. And this is something else that's so different from school, right? In school, the learning kind of stays in the classroom. Here, we're kind of telling them like, no, you can take it a step forward. It's on you how you want to keep sharing what you've created and working on your ideas to make them even better and put them out in the world. And it's just incredible to see the reactions when you tell them this.
Yeah, that's something that we talk a lot about in Rite of Passage, and something I've realized where this is where writing education goes wrong, in that a lot of writing education, if you talk to the average high schooler, they just hate writing. I hated writing, and I now teach writing. And so if I look at what changed, I spent a decade and a half only writing my essays for one person, the teacher, and other people in the class barely even read what I was writing. And then once I started writing online, I was like, oh my goodness, I can write an article and then reach interesting people, which then lead to new friendships, business opportunities. And that then made writing so much fun. It was like writing was such a high leverage activity. I could sit in my room. I could then move minds with my fingertips. And that was crazy to me. But I want to get really specific here. Talk about the way that one student, we don't have to say who the student is out of respect for privacy, but one student, what happened with their problem that they solved? Then how did that one student go through the arc of your process? And then what did they actually present at the end? Because for us, we believe that until you present, we believe that until you share, and until you thingify what you're making, the project isn't done. And all learning should be in service of the project that you're actually doing.
Okay, so I'll give you two examples. So one of the kids, and I actually knew this kid from before because I had actually taught him for 2 years previously. He was really concerned. Like, the problem that was really bothering him was the amount of time that he had been spending in screen time through this quarantine period, and how much, since he was alone, he's home, he's just using his computer, watching Netflix, using his phone, and he couldn't stop thinking about this and the fact that so many kids out there are probably going through the same thing. And he's like, well, we kids love to play, but right now we're very limited to this digital devices. And I was like, well, what can we do about this? And he's really passionate about soccer and about making comics. Those are two interests that he has. And we're like, well, how can we combine this in order to try to start solving this problem? And he said, well, I'm very creative. Like, I like to create things with my hands, and I love soccer. So I'm thinking maybe I'm not playing soccer right now because I don't have a soccer court and I don't have the ball, but maybe I could find recycled materials home and build my own court, and then actually like document my process of how to do this so that I can share it with other kids and they can start doing this at home. And he said, and instead of just doing it, through writing, I'm actually going to create a comic that's going to be funny so that I can engage kids through my comic that I'll make digital, explaining the different steps of the process. So at first it may seem like a very simple idea, and it's not going to solve the entire problem, but he's definitely going to reach out to other boys out there or girls out there that enjoy soccer, that, they say, oh, I can actually grab some recycled materials at home. This is the steps that I need to follow in order to build it. And here's a comic that explains it. And then when he was presenting, another student that was in the class said, you know what, I have a YouTube channel and I have a bunch of followers. I could, share your comic in my YouTube channel so that you could attract more people. So you could see how they started to bounce off ideas and new ideas would start to spark. And he told me at the end, he said, I'm just impressed that something that I can do from home that I enjoy, because again, I enjoy doing this, I like writing comics, can actually go out into the world and I can inspire other kids to do it at home. That feels really powerful. So that's one example. And then the other example that I think about is this girl that I also knew from before. She's very, very passionate about dogs. She has 8 dogs that she's rescued. And she, for many years with her mom, has been doing different things to save dogs and to take them to the vet and different things. But she hadn't found a way to raise awareness about this. And she loves to write, and she's actually a great writer. And she came up with the idea, well, why don't I make a newsletter? And I was like, okay, what are you thinking about this? And she started saying, well, I want to make it short. I want to make it to the point, and I could start sending these newsletters out and make it kid friendly so that I raise awareness and I kind of explain the things that people can do and the kids can do at home in order to contribute to this cause that I'm so passionate about. And she created her newsletter, and it was incredible. And I gave her some ideas of how she could now turn it digital and start to send it out. And she hadn't realized how much she enjoyed, mixing something that she likes, which is writing, to contribute to the problem that she really wants to solve and the cause that she's really, passionate about. So just having these small moments of sparking of excitement and kids being like, wow, I can actually do something that's meaningful and that I'm doing on my own. It's just priceless. I think that leads them to want to keep learning more and keep exploring and seeing what they can do on their own. And that's the whole point of it, right? To spark that has been lost in school.
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that I think about what this is when I was a kid, like in elementary school and in middle school, we had these things called pen pals, where you would write letters to somebody in another country, and you'd write the letter, and then it would go, and then you'd get a letter back. And it was never very interesting because you never saw a photo of the other person. If you did, you never did video chat. And then even then, you never actually had a meaningful connection with that person beyond sending letters back and forth. Sometimes it worked. Like there were very rare times where 2 people, one from my school, another from the other side of the world, actually became friends. But what we're saying, like we had students in Pakistan, in India, in Panama, in Argentina, like all over the world. And we have almost as many countries as we do people in these cohorts. And so what we have is kids who are like 9 and 10 and 11 years old who are now making friends with people from countries they've never heard of, countries that they couldn't even find on a map. And I think that what's really cool is that we just come together every day for a week and we all work together on these projects. And to get back to the pen pal idea, when you're actually working on a project with people, you get close to each other. And so even if every individual, every kid is working on their own project, we're giving them time to give and receive feedback, to then share ideas based off of their own intellectual passions and curiosities. And our goal is basically to get kids so excited about what they're doing that they can play productively.
hmm And that actually leads me to the next point, which is at the end, I was talking to the different campers and asking them, well, what do you feel about this? What's something that you would like to see more in the future? Would you like to come back? They all said they wanted to come back. One thing that they did mention was that they felt like maybe 1 week wasn't enough in order to continue forging those friendships and that community that they had become so excited with. They were concerned that last day. They said, well, what are we going to do now? Like, we've met these people, like, how are we going to keep in touch? And, that made me realize that kids are craving these connections that the internet has made it possible, to have. So a way that I see this going forward is, actually start building this community of children from all over the place that, all over the world, that have ideas that they want to explore, that they want to build upon each other. And they're no longer limited to just making friends and talking to people in their classrooms. Here, there's a place where they can have fun, they can build things, they can talk about their ideas openly without getting in trouble, and bounce off each other ideas and make different friends. So that's definitely something that I want to keep exploring, and that we should keep exploring. To that community is so important in this process of learning about the things that you're interested in. So for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of where I want to take this as we look forward is to give kids the oh my goodness experiences of what it's like to have the internet in your pocket. So if you have a phone, then you have access to all the world's information. You can go on YouTube and start looking at all these tutorials. You can then go on Wikipedia and read whatever you want. And what then begins to happen, and this is one of my strongest beliefs about online learning, is that it inverts the learning process. So in school, you start with the basics, where you start by studying the basics of science. You start by studying the basics of biology, chemistry, whatever it is. You start with the basics in school, and then you expand towards curiosity. On the internet, you start with curiosity and expand towards the basics. So what you do in online learning is you say, ha, that looks interesting, I'm going to go check that out. And then you're like a gold miner. You're like, where is the gold? And you're on this perpetual learning gold rush. It's this adventure. You're walking with your pickaxe. You're finding the different rivers. You're getting together with different gold miners and sharing all this information. And what you're just doing is you're following different rabbit holes that then can lead to gold. And you're digging, and you find things. And then you're like, okay, I'm bored with this. And then you're like, oh, but we heard there's gold over there, actually. And so what I really am excited about is teaching kids how to use the internet so that they can just learn on their own. And you said something very profound earlier in this discussion, where you said that the goal of school should be teaching kids how to learn, both how to love learning and how to go through the process of learning itself. And that's exactly right, because what's happened in the world is we've shifted from information scarcity to information abundance. And now no school, no library, no teacher is better than the best of that thing on the internet. The best school library doesn't have close to as much information as you'll find on Wikipedia. When I was in college, I was like, wait, this is so weird. My very best teachers don't know nearly as much as the best lecturers on YouTube. And so it's about giving kids the agency to go follow their curiosity and be those gold miners.
Absolutely. And show them that they have, like you said, the power in their hands. They're just one click away. right? And this is something that again, they are not used to, because in school the teacher is the one showering them with the facts, and this is what you need to learn, and here's the textbook, and then suddenly, like you said, the process is inverted. Suddenly it's, okay, what do you want to learn about? Okay, what can you do in order to learn more about it? Where are you going to search? It's just one click away. And getting them to see that learning happens in different ways. For example, like we were doing, when they're doing a project, this requires for them to plan. This requires research gathering, and they have, to manage their time, and they have to synthesize the information that they're finding, and they need them to work in teams, and they have to use their creativity. And, the list goes on and on of all the skills that they're learning by working on a project. Instead of, like you said, in school, they teach you specifically the skills, and then they say, okay, now go apply them. Here's like, no, you are learning this as you are exploring and working on your projects or on whatever it is that you're learning. And when kids realize this, they realize it's a superpower. They see that they're in control, and that the things that they can learn are just unlimited. And it's incredible when they make that realization. And it's our job to help them realize that, and be there in order to show them how to do that.
Yeah, as we begin to close, I want you to tell two stories. I want you to tell the story of your student who grew disenchanted with the education system because he or she said that it's all about just getting to the next grade, and that these kids are realizing that this is just a game of climbing the ladder. And having climbed that ladder myself, and I didn't do great in school, but I went to a good college. I graduated from college, then got to work for a New York ad agency. And I actually have a very good friend, one of my best friends in the world. He was captain of his high school soccer team, then went to Harvard, was captain of the Harvard soccer team, then went to go work for one of the largest private equity funds in the world, one of the top most coveted jobs that you could get coming out of Harvard. 24 years old, looks in the mirror and says, I have won every single game that has been put in front of me by life, and I am miserable. I am doing work I don't like. I'm not healthy. I have friends who are in their 20s with chronic illnesses due to the stress, due to the hours, due to all the time that they spend sitting down. And talk about kids actually coming to terms with this. It reminds me of a quote from an Atlantic article by George Packer. And the quote goes something to the effect of, talking to the seventh grader, 12 years old, saying, the reason why seventh grade is so important is because if you don't do well in seventh grade, you don't do well in high school. And if you don't get into a good high school, well, you don't get into a good college. And if you don't get into a good college, you're not going to have a good job. And then that means that when you don't get into a good college, it means that then you're setting yourself to fail at life. And to have seventh graders begin to think about these ideas, it's criminal. So talk about that and the quote that you recently told me about, and then talk about, as we begin to close, the experience that you had with standardized testing, where you actually didn't teach to the test when you were teaching. I think this was in Boston. You can tell me what's right or wrong, but I just love this story, and I think it's very true to your philosophy of what teaching should look like and some of the problems with teaching to the test.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first one. And the quote that I shared was one student, but really I've had this conversation with many students. And the general, premise that I hear from them is, and this was actually this is a quote from another book, but this is the feeling that the kids have. They feel like they love learning about the things that they're curious about and they like, but they hate school. And the reason why they hate school, it's because it's become a place where they just have to sit down and learn about learn in a way that's not, relevant to them, but about things that are imposed. This is what you need to know, and this is how you need to do it, and this is what good writing looks like, and this is what a good book is, and they just keep hearing this, but that's not what they're feeling, and they don't touch in school. They have to do so many things, and these things have nothing to do with what they enjoy, and they just don't see it as relevant. So what that student said is, the things that we're doing in school, they're not really related. Like I cannot relate it to what I do when I leave school, right? And it doesn't really matter. What matters is that I pass the test. My teachers have told me it's super important. I take this seriously. I pass the test and I go to the next grade. If I do that, then I've accomplished my goal. And I'm like, no, the goal is that you learn something, that it's meaningful to you, and that you keep learning. And they're like, no, the goal is just to finish this so that I can go to the next step. So they learn again, like how to go through the motions and what they need to do in order to pass. And there's just no retention and no real meaning. And they graduate and they end up leaving school with such a negative attitude towards learning, which is really what's going to make them keep growing as individuals. So that was just really powerful and really sad to hear that from students, that they've come to realize that. And then what students would tell me is that they had fun in my class because they felt like I would ask them, well, what do you guys want to do? What are we going to, like, it was all in a playful spirit and talking about the things that they were interested in. And they say, well, that makes learning fun because I see the relevance and we're going from something that we're interested in. So that's one side. And then about the standardized testing, it's something that has been very frustrating. And, I'm very guilty about this because I had to go through the process in the different schools, and I had to give out homework and give out all the tests and prepare the kids for the tests. And then I was in this particular school that does that gets ready for this thing called the MAP tests, which you do at the beginning of the year, and then you get scored in reading, in language arts, and in math. And then there's a projected growth, and then you take it again at the end of the year, and then you see how much the student grew in these 3 specific areas. Now, it's a very long and tedious test, and it's very stressful for both the kids and the teachers, because teacher performance in many schools, like in the one that I worked at, is tied to the students' scores. So for the first 2 years, I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I taught the specific topics. I covered everything that was going to be in the test. And then 2 to 3 weeks before the end of the year test, the teachers and the whole school goes in this like test prep mode. And everyone's really stressed out. We're barely teaching about, other things other than test prep. And that's the homework and that's the whole mentality. And it's really stressful. And by the 3rd year, it just got to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to do this. I am going to teach I'm going to cover the topics I need to cover, but I'm going to do it using the ideas I find on Pinterest or things that the kids tell me that they come up with. And we started doing lots of projects and we covered all the different skills, but in a very different way and very, separate from the curriculum. And then when those 2 weeks before the test came and all the teachers started doing test prep, I said, I'm not going to do test prep and we'll see what happens. I mean, I haven't been teaching for this test for the entire year now. I don't think I'm going to accomplish anything doing 2 weeks of test prep other than stress them out more and make them even more miserable. So no test prep. And then the day comes, the kids take the test. It's 3 different days. And then when I meet with the principal to go over my evaluation and what I've done and how my kids did, she goes, Anna, I have here the list of all the school and how the kids, because kids from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade take this test, which is insane. And she had all the ranking and she said, well, your class scored first place in reading and in math. What is it that you did? And my eyes were just like, whoa. And I told her, I was like, you know what? I actually did not teach from the curriculum. I did not do test prep. And actually she said, tell me what it is that you did. Let's talk about this. And in the next professional development, you can talk about this, what you did with teachers so that they can emulate and replicate this. And I was like, well, if you want to know the truth, I did not really teach from the curriculum. I followed my intuition. We did the things that seemed fun and relevant and things that I felt like kids were actually going to use in real life. And I did 0 test prep. So what do you think? And she was like, well, actually, don't worry about it. We're not going to be sharing this. Thank you for sharing. She was kind of impressed, but not necessarily in favor of me sharing this with other teachers. And I think that's just a very good example of what's going on in schools. Like teachers have an intuition of what works and how children really learn, but we cannot do the things that we know deep inside that work because we're under this structure with all these metrics and different things that we need to do in order for kids to learn. That's doing exactly the opposite. And I just got tired of that. And that's why I got out of it. But it's really the reality that we see in many, many places around the world.
Ana Lorena Fabrega, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. This has been great.